Okay, hope everybody's doing good. I've seen a few videos on shimming diffs. I figured I'd do one on the V4 just because it is a little bit different. But before that, one thing that I've been having good success with is this part number provides you that shim. And on the spiral gear, this one's all jacked up. But inside the diff case, after you put this, after you get the bearing set, put this shim on, and it fits right over that. And then I'll stick that in there, and it actually gives a nice little bit of a push into the actual drive cup or the planetary gear here. I guess it's the spiral spur gear is what it would be called. So anyway, I've been doing that with quite a bit of success. I've also been going back and I found another part number that will shim these drive cups on the V3 and V2 and even V1 ARRMAs. Yeah, that gasket's done. What I like to do is just get a little screwdriver under here and just kind of pry up on this. Sometimes you have to use a pointy, like a little pick, to get, especially after you've shimmed it. Although if you're taking apart a V3 diff before, you'll see that ARRMA has started. Yep, this one I haven't replaced. So you can actually see that ARRMA is now including a shim internally here and externally on this drive cup, this diff cup, whatever you want to call them. Oop, there went a tool. So this is the one on the outside. That these aren't present on the V3, V2. So they're trying to cut down some of the slop that's in these. If you take your old ones and do this, you can see quite a bit more play. So they'll do that on the outside of the diff case, and then they do another one on the inside. So the difference between this and the kit, this Mugen Psyche E0206, is the size of these planetary diffs, or the diff shim. So that's the size of the other one. So you can just imagine, right? So it's got more surface area. I guess you'd have less rotation with the gear. But you can see how that fits entirely over it. But again, it's a little harder to get underneath of this because you don't know if you're prying on the shim or the actual gear. And then once you get the pin in, the pin will go in over the shim, which makes it more difficult to get off. See, and I don't even have the pin in right now, but I'm not underneath the shim. That's the problem. Or I'm on top of the shim, I should say. So you would do this with the Mugen Psyche 206 kit. You would leave the external shim on the diff cup outside the bearing case. I don't think my O-ring was quite in there yet. And you would put this on the inside. And all that does is just takes out the flex, having both sides. Okay, so this is the part number I've been using to replace the ARRMA external shim. Well, not replace, but if I'm going through the V3 diff, I'm going to go ahead and add that external shim to again cut down on that play. So if you look, that external shim sits right there. So in this instance, this part number, which is available on Hobby King, these are like super cheap. I just bought a whole bunch of them. They take a long time because they're coming from China. But it fits right over there perfectly. And then the bearing will actually sit right very nicely on top of that. So anyway, that's what I've been doing. You can see this is a little bit smaller diameter than the stock ARRMA one, but it facilitates the same thing. You really don't need all of this in between that drive cup and that the outside of your diff case at the top of this spur gear. So anyway, like I said though, I will be replacing these. Just take this apart again here. I may have been showing you the other side. I think these are the same size. Yeah, they are. So that's on the outside, and this is on the inside. It's the same. It's the same shim. And then this is the one from Basher, which I think is actually meant for a Berserker, but they're so cheap. I ordered a ton of them. As we talked about, we're going to go ahead and leave the stock one on the outside of the V4. So I'm putting the stock shim back on the external side of the spur gear. And it's a good time to inspect your O-rings. So if you can kind of inspect those and clean the dirt off of them, just make sure there's no, stuck it to my thumb. Make sure there's no imperfections, things of that nature that would allow it to leak or let contaminants in. The other thing I'll do is I'll usually squirt. Let's go ahead and get some of this Team Associated green slime. There's the part number. Pretty sure I saw this from Rich Duper Bash, which everybody knows. So anyway, you can use that on it. Kind of just get it all over. And that kind of keeps it in place, which is nice. And again, we're going to go ahead and use the Mugen Psyche bigger planetary shim. Go ahead and fit some grease on this as it goes through. Oop, almost did it. Notoriously forgetful for putting the bearing on before I do this. So again, we have our external shim on. Thing that is nice about these internal shims is you can kind of just hold them down and work this back and forth to get it in there. And it keeps your O-ring kind of positioned correctly. And then again, we're just going to take our pin, center that, and all we're doing with this bigger Mugen Psyche shim is replacing the stock shim in the V3 or V4. In the V3, these do not exist, so you'll open this up and you'll have nothing underneath this pin, and you won't have any shims externally on the drive cup outside of the diff case. So when I've been rebuilding my V3, V2 diffs, I've gone ahead and shimmed them internally and externally, just again to cut down that slop. And you can still see there's some play, there's some movement in there. It still has some. So now we're going to go ahead and fit these planetary gears on. Obviously make sure they spin. So we added that planetary gear to that side. And you can see it on this side. It's still got that smaller stock gear in it, or shim, internal shim. So we're going to take out the pin, go ahead and remove the diff cup. And again, we see this ARRMA provided shim on the outside. So like the other side, it's externally shimmed, which again, you will not see in the V3 or the V2 or the V1. So ARRMA is listening, which is nice. So we're going to go ahead and take out the smaller. And I mean, these bigger planetary shims come in this Mugen Psyche 206 kit. So you might as well use them, right? So what I have been doing is keeping these other stock bearings out and just using those on the outside of my V3 and V2 diffs that I still have. So we'll go ahead and put the green slime back on this O-ring. Not back, on it before we install it. Let's see here. I think I bought this green slime like a year ago, and it's still, I've rebuilt a lot of diffs. So I go ahead and install that O-ring. Then we're going to put our bigger planetary shim on. And then again, don't forget, I already did it, your bearing. And then we're going to stick our drive cup on that's already got the shim on it. Through. And I did forget to put some green slime on this, but it's fine, it should be plenty. I mean, and obviously too, if you're going through this, you should really inspect it. And if you're seeing any type of wear on the gears, go ahead and pick up one of these diff gear sets. Comes with really everything you need, and there's the part number. This will be specific for any of the Kraton and Notorious, Outcast vehicles. All right, so we'll go ahead and install this. Somebody's yelling at the dog. Sometimes I've actually used this included wheel nut driver just to make sure that thing comes through without any obstructions, or kind of holds it down while you push on the drive cup. Yeah, that's much smoother. So then again, we're going to take our pin, and like previously discussed, the opening or the hole on the inside is aligned with these slits in the drive cup. So if you look inside there, my hole for this is going to be right there. So again, I'll just slide that pin in, and it shouldn't be crazy tight, but it should be snug. You shouldn't. You know what's funny is doing this before I was, before I saw that they were externally shimming, and I got some shims myself. You'd put this in, and there'd still be a fair amount of slop. And you can see there still is a decent amount. So we'll drop this planetary back in, move it around, and I kind of take a couple taps with the, to make sure it's set in there good. Still spinning. Okay. The satellite gears, get these out of the way. So I've already shimmed these, but when they come stock, they'll just have one shim, and all this Mugen Psyche kit is doing is add another shim. So this kit will come with additional shims for these satellite gears, and you'll just double them up. So you'll just add one of these shims to each, or behind each one of these planetary gears, or excuse me, satellite gears. So I got two on that side. I had a bearing going out on this diff. It really didn't need to be rebuilt, but I figured I was doing it anyway. I'd show you. And again, we're going to have the cutouts to the outside. And you want the smooth face of this this little insert to the inside. We're going to just drop this in, kind of rotate this internal shaft around so the cutout is sticking up. You'll see why that is in a minute. I'm sure people have already talked about this. It's in the manual even. So you can see it kind of sit in there. I may not move exactly because, yeah, there you go. Let's make sure you got some movement. So this is already has the double shims on either side behind these satellite gears. All I'm going to do is make sure I rotate this center shaft down. Let's see. There we go. Then I'm just going to drop it in. I kind of stick those in there. Let them kind of get set. You can see how these aren't flush yet. Okay, now everything's flush. It's good to go. So then I would go ahead and fill this up with whatever silicone diff fluid you want. This happens to be a rear diff, so I'm just going to go ahead and put 20K in it. And you can goop it up pretty good on the top because it'll suck it down. Okay, now while that's kind of settling in, we'll talk about the external bearing shims specific to your diff case. I'm running hot racing diff cases. I've also run obviously the ARRMA stock plastic ones, and I've only ever ended up with 2 of these. So these would be similar to these Kyosho and this part number right here, and I've seen people list this out. So that's the size of them. I also did get some from Basher that are a little bit bigger. Admittedly, I haven't really messed with those yet because I have plenty of these others. So we're going to fit 2 of these on the outside. Okay. I kind of realized is one slit on one side was a little bit wider than the other. You can even still see it. It's kind of bowed out here. So I took some channel locks and just collapsed that a little bit more. And now there's no issue with the fitment here. So just be mindful of that. I didn't even notice that was an issue until I was doing this. So anyway, you'll do that, and then as that kind of fits in your diff case, it'll kind of force this spur gear into the input. And mind you, this is a makeshift here. So it'll make sure your gear mesh is just about perfect from what I'm seeing. It'll push this way, and then you have the shim behind the input, or the spiral cut input shaft here. And it'll push this way. Then you have the internal shims taking care of everything inside. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and button this up. Everybody should know how to put diff fluid in your diff case, but if not, you just make sure there's no air in it. 20K is pretty easy. It kind of bubbles up pretty quick, but if you're doing thicker, you're gonna have to be more patient and just let it kind of rest and take its time to kind of allow the air bubbles to come up. So with that, then just obviously make sure you got good gaskets. Anytime I get a break like that, taking it off, the gasket's pretty much done. So anyway, I'll be replacing the gasket and getting this all put back together, but hopefully this video was helpful. If you like the content, please like and subscribe. And again, the part numbers I was using, E0206. These Kyosho, I'm not sure if you can even get these anymore, but there's the shim size.